Hi, my name is Elle Billing. I am a chronically ill queer femme, and I'm tired. I'm here this episode and every episode to dig at the roots of our collective fatigue, explore ways to direct our care in compassionate and sustainable ways, and to harness creative expression to heal ourselves and to heal our world. Welcome to Hoorf, Radical Care in a Late Capitalist Hexscape. My guest for this episode is Jordan Thornquest. Jordan Thornquest is a music maker and game developer living in Philadelphia. I'm excited to have him on the podcast today because he used to live with me and now we live a time zone apart. Welcome to the podcast, Jordan. Hi, Jordan. Welcome to Hoorf.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to, well, the audience doesn't get to see you, but I do, and I'm excited to see you.
I'm excited to see you.
That is a fabulous shirt, by the way.
Thank you. This is a cute little vintage thrift store find.
It's very tropical as I'm sitting here in my tall wool socks and I have a blanket.
Oh God, yeah, isn't it like stupid cold over there? Feels like -22 or something.
Let me check. I have my phone right here. It is stupid cold. It is, the ambient temperature is 4. The high today
4.
was 6. But it says it just feels like 4. There must be no breeze right now.
I don't like that.
That seems like fake news. It's like, I know where I live.
Like, that seems too cool.
That seems inaccurate.
It's too comfy.
Yeah, well, I'll be darned. There is no wind. We've entered the twilight zone. The dew point is -6.
The dew point?
The
Jeez.
dew point, yeah. I'm flabbergasted. My gast is flabbered. The high tomorrow is 15.
Oh,
it's supposed to actually warm up over the weekend before it gets cold again. Warm up. But like, our house is a little chilly, and this is the room that I record in, is like in the back corner of the house. And I brought a blanket with me today because I have been cold all day. So
yeah, that sounds brutal. It's I mean, as we're talking about weather, it's been mostly like 50 degrees here in Philly, but it just, like, I think the cold snap has happened. Like, it's officially feeling like it's starting to be actually winter outside in December, which seems normal.
Yeah, that's normal winter time. Philly. I've never been there. I was going to try to get out to visit you when you were still living in New York, and it didn't work out. And so now you're in Philly, and so I still haven't got to visit you out there either.
Well, what's cool about Philly is, like, I didn't really realize how good transit is on the East Coast. Like, when I moved to New York, that was one of the first things I learned about, which was not just like the subway, but Amtrak is super legit. So like, you can go from Philly to New York in about 65, 70 minutes. So it's faster to go from Philly to New York than it is from when I was in Twin Falls, and like, you drive to Boise. So if you want to go to New York, it's just like a quick, you just hop over and you're like, oh, now I'm in a completely different place. And it's like $15. It's amazing.
I just had to drive 60 miles one way to go get a mammogram.
No. Oh God.
Speaking of the difference in how close things are transit wise, there's a big difference between like how close together and accessible, relatively speaking, things in the East are compared to the Midwest and the West. But even the difference between like me rural and like being in Twin Falls, I was like, everything's so close together here. Like, towns are only 6 miles apart where we were in Idaho. But then it was like 2 hours to Boise, where some of my medical specialists were. And I'm like, well, that's a pain in the butt. But here it's like an hour, but the weather's usually worse in the winter.
Yeah, how bad is the snow out there?
The roads were fine today.
Good.
But I also try to schedule everything after noon, so I don't have to drive in the mornings in case the roads are bad.
True. You have to wait for them to actually make it so that's safe.
Yeah. Till either the frost to to burn off, or if any plowing needs to be done. We have plows here. We didn't have them in Twin Falls.
No, didn't they get rid of them? They're like, oh, we're gonna
Yeah,
cut down on
before
our
I moved
budget.
there, like, because I
Oh
moved
my
there, I was like,
god.
well, we don't get a lot of snow, but we also don't plow it when it happens. It's kind of a problem.
Oh no.
So, anyway, I'm going to ask my first question and we'll
Do it.
get to it. How have you received care this week?
It's a good question. I don't know. Receiving care, as in from someone else, is that a fair way to put it?
From someone else, from yourself? How have you
Mm,
created space for care?
I've been getting into baths lately.
Oh, I love baths.
Dude, I came late to the bath party. I Part of it was just because I think all of the places that I've lived as a solo adult, especially, was just showers. We
Hmm.
didn't really have a lot of places that had bathtubs. So not this apartment in Philly, but the one I had just before in New York, was the first apartment that I had with just like my own bathtub in a long time. And I remember 2 months in, I was in New York in that apartment with my sibling. My sibling's like, yeah, I think I'm gonna take a bath. I've just been dancing all day. My body's sore. And I was like, man, I could do that. And so I did that in New York. And then when I came here in Philly, I was like, oh, this apartment also has a bathtub. We're set. And so my feet have been really achy because I've been trying to break in these new boots and these new sandals. And so I've been taking baths more and just like soaking in the hot water, and it rules. I'm really happy that
Mm.
that I have access to it. It feels like a privilege. It's very cozy.
Do you use Epsom salts when you take a hot bath?
No, I've been meaning to, but I don't think I've really taken the plunge. I think part of me was like, I need to buy it, and I don't really know like how like which ones are legit, or if there's like
Epsom
a right
salt
way
is
to do
Epsom
it.
salt. All it
Yeah.
is what, magnesium sulfate. I mean, you can get some that have like lavender in them.
Mm.
I just buy the giant ass bag of plain Epsom salts and I just dump that shit into my bath. Um, it really helps me with like my muscle aches and my restless legs because like
What
your
does
body,
it do? I know this is a
like your body
care.
can absorb magnesium. As far as I understand, I am not a medical professional. I do not understand everything about anatomy, but as far as I understand, you can absorb magnesium through your skin,
Okay, well,
and it's really good for like muscle aches and stuff.
I'm gonna do that. I didn't even know that I could. I thought it was mostly scent based when I heard about Epsom salts. I thought it was mostly like aromatic in terms of what it did
No,
for
it's not
healing.
like smelling salts or anything, and it's not like bath salts, the drug.
If my brain made that connotation, I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
So I'm a very my sister has when we were younger once described me as book smart but dumb to the world.
Yes, totally.
I don't like to use that phrasing anymore because of the ableist kind of like usage of dumb, but
Yeah, yeah.
I have a history of being very naive to worldly things. So the
Mm.
first time I heard of bath salts, the drug, I was like, people are taking bath salts? Like, how do you like, and trying to figure out how people were getting high on Epsom salts? Like, I'm like, there's
Yeah,
no way.
totally.
There's no way that I'm understanding this correctly.
You can't fit that up your nose?
But what other way can you understand it? Like,
Yeah,
why would you call a drug that? That doesn't make sense.
that's really
I still
funny.
don't think it makes sense.
No, no, not at all.
Tell me that you take things literally, but selectively literally. Because I also love wordplay and stuff, but apparently that one was too much.
Yeah, whenever I'd hang out with our friend Braden, like
Yeah.
just I would make it so clear how absolutely not in tune to drug culture I was, and it was just funny because he knew me well, and so he'd know when I was either talking about something I had no idea what I was talking about, or like bullshitting to pretend I knew what I was talking about when talking to somebody else, and he could just see his face. He's just like, yeah, you've never done a drug in your life. You're adorable.
It's like you're just a cinnamon roll. So, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you on the podcast, like now, as opposed to any like some other time down the road, is because health insurance is in the news right now
Yes, it is.
for reasons. Okay, so you used to live with me. You rented my
Mhm.
basement when I was living in Twin Falls. And so this episode is actually going to come out. There'll be a 1st January episode. But right now, when we're recording, it is like the middle of December. And it's a very conspicuous anniversary for us.
Yes. I didn't even think about it. Wow, yeah, it's
Yeah, it's like
it's
this
oh
week.
wow.
It's this
Wow.
week.
Oh my god.
So you lived with me for, gosh, how long was it? I don't
I
even
think it was
remember.
a few months. I think it was during the
6
winter months because
months?
I was
6
living out of a
months?
van at that time
And then it was
intentionally.
cold, and so you
Yeah,
moved into my basement where it was toasty.
exactly. I was like, I need to winterize in some place, and so I think
Right.
that was like September, October was when it was starting to get cold, and I moved
Yeah.
in.
So you to give people a background of what happened before the scary phone call, I was in my studio. I was painting, and you came in and said, "Hey, I'm gonna go walk the dog." Your dog,
Mhm.
not my dog.
Yes.
Um, and I said, "Okay, bye." And you left. And like 5 minutes later, my phone rings and it's you. And I answer the phone and I say, "Is this a butt dial?" And it was not a butt dial.
No, it was not.
You said, "I just got hit by a car.
Mm,
I'm laying in the street. I need you to come get my dog."
mhm.
And that was like, I was in shock,
Yeah.
obviously, but like, so were you.
Yeah.
And like, we're laughing about it now because it was so, it feels so long ago and so absurd. Because like, there were so many things about the situation that were just like, this shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have been hit by a car, like, to
Yeah,
start
and it
with.
was I mean, to start with too, like I don't know if I ever asked you when we've talked about it, but like it wasn't quite dark out. Like it was getting a little dusky is my
Mhm.
recollection of it. And so, yeah, I mean, do you want me to start just with
Yeah, go ahead.
kind of
So,
the
like, my question is sort of
Yeah.
like, uh, oh, speaking of dogs,
Hey,
there's Winky.
I can hear her.
So, yeah, just your experience with the car accident and, like, the surgeries and then getting back on your feet and navigating the insurance and suddenly becoming disabled or how much whatever you wanna get into kind of around that.
Yeah, we should yeah, let's talk through the because I mean, you were a big part of it. Like it was like you said, I walked out with my dog and she and I were going to this park that was pretty close to your apartment. And we were just going kind of like we normally do, where we walk down the street, and then yeah, your apartment is on the side of the street that you have to cross over to get to the park.
Mhm.
And there's crosswalks on some corners of this park and then no crosswalks on others. And so to get to where a crosswalk would be, you have to like basically walk along the street around the park for a while before you get to a safe intersection. And so the only place for me to step off otherwise is the corner of your street and then crossing over to the basically the middle of the park. And so that was usually where we crossed and it was like at a place where you can tell like if you're a car driving it's a T intersection so the car would have
Mhm.
the right of way but then anyone that's on your street would have to yield to the left or the right. And
Mhm.
so I was crossing with my dog and she stopped in the middle of the street, so I just like looked over to my right as I was crossing the street and there was a pair of headlights coming down and so I like waved at them to kind of let them know that I was going to stop. And then I went to turn to like pick up my dog because I think she had found something just caught her attention. And then I went to like kind of go and grab her, and then she ran just like she basically was done smelling what she was smelling and went across the street. But I was hunched over with my back turned to the car, and it had just hit me square in the butt, and it launched me across the intersection. Like the part I remember
Mhm.
most vividly was like the sudden sense of like I could hear the car getting closer, and then it kept getting closer. And I was like, oh, it's not going to stop. And then I was in the air and I flew across the intersection and I landed on my butt, sort of just like in a sitting position. And I
Mhm.
tried to like get up onto my feet. I was like, oh, ouch, that really, really hurts. And so I just laid down and I was laying in the road just on a sheet of ice. And I
Mhm.
think I did use my own phone. My
You did.
glasses
You
did I
called
call
me
you
on
on
your
my
phone.
phone?
Yep.
Yeah, my glasses flew off, so, like, I couldn't see anything, I couldn't see where my dog was, I couldn't, really tell, like, where anything was, I was just staring at the air, but I was wearing my coat, and my coat had my phone in my chest pocket, so it also didn't break. So I pulled it out and I called you, and I just let you know, like, "Hey, I can't get up and I need you to come get my dog." And pretty shortly after, the person who hit me came out and someone behind them called the police. The police came and called an ambulance and like people were really helpful. Like I just remember seeing faces coming into my vision and eventually I saw yours.
Yes. And by the time I got there, they were loading you into the ambulance,
Hmm.
and someone had put your dog in a car to stay warm.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Hey, are you the roommate?" I'm like, "I'm the roommate." And they're like, "Here's the dog." And like I was in my pajamas and by that point, and like even though it wasn't super late, I was home from work and I put my jammies
Yeah. You're
on
like, I'm
and
done. I'm not going out
I'm like,
again.
"I'm done. I'm not going again." Just kidding. Um, oh, and then I had ordered takeout
Oh no.
or delivery, and so, like, the delivery driver was calling me as I was leaving the house, and they're like, "Hey, which house is like, I think I found your house." I'm like, "Yeah, but my roommate just got hit by a car, so if you could
Really?
just" Yeah, and I'm like, "But, don't put the food in the house because my dog doesn't like visitors, just, like, hang it on
Hmm.
the doorknob, it'll be fine." I'm like, This is not a good
I
time
have to
right now.
go.
I have to go." Yeah, it was just the whole thing. So then I get
Mhm.
home with your dog, and then I have to call your mom. Like,
Yeah, oh gosh, I can't
yeah, it
imagine
was
being the
just a
person
whole
telling someone's mom, like, "Hey, your kid is not okay."
he's on his way to the hospital in an
Mm.
ambulance.
Yeah, no, I mean, after that was kind of a blur. They put me in an ambulance, and they're like, "Yeah, we're pretty sure that it's your spine." And I was like, "That's cool. That's what anyone wants to hear whenever something's broken." But they
Mhm.
brought me to the local hospital in Twin, and I remember being, like, on a bed, and they were just kinda like, "Yeah, you can roll over if you need to, just like try not to get up." And then after a while they like checked a couple of x-rays and they're like, okay, never mind, you can't move, you have to stay very still because you can't, we don't want you to break anything further. And my sister uh came in, and she was super helpful, and she was just like basically the one that was telling me like, hey, we're talking to mom, we're letting her know what's happening, we're talking to Danielle, you let me know that my dog was safe, which was like the thing I was most concerned about. I always tell people this story, and the first thing they hear is like I was in the road with my dog, and they're like, oh my god, is your dog fine? I was like, yes, my dog is okay. But could you imagine if she wasn't? Because then this is like a double whammy of, yeah, I got hit by a car, my dog is super dead, thanks for asking.
Yeah. No, Jess is fine.
She's safe, she's great.
I mean, she was
But
grumpy about it.
yeah, well, how was she? I do want to ask. Like at this point, I'm gone.
Like, she wouldn't eat and drink that night because you weren't home.
Mm,
But then when your sister and her husband came over to get her, she was like, "Oh, thank God."
yeah, someone I know. She's
Yeah.
so funny. She's very bitchy, but she's very obedient for other people, more so than with me. Like I would always drop her off at people's homes and be like, she might, do this or that or be kind of difficult. And they're like, no, she was great. She just would sit at the door and wait for you to come home, but she'd eat her food and she'd play. But she's she's like such a personality.
Yeah, she was pretty stressed out that night. So, like, you ended up having 1 surgery or 2?
I think it was two. They flew me on a plane, which was the first time I'd ever been on a plane from Twin to Boise. I was on morphine. It felt great. But then I was in the hospital for 5 days, and this was during kind of the year of 2020 of COVID, and so it was still during a time where the hospitals were full. So
Mhm.
I was in a waiting room in Boise, I think for like 10 hours, just waiting to get a doctor to come in. But two different doctors came in. One did work on my hip, one did work on my spine, and then there was just like a period of, I think I got hit on Monday. They did the surgeries on Tuesday, and then I was out of the hospital by Friday.
With that sweet back brace.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
like basically fully they gave me this back brace I had to learn how to put on. They taught me how to get out of bed a certain way, and then they kind of gave me
Yeah.
some preliminary physical therapy. And then there's like, okay, well, you can walk from one end of the room to the other with your back brace on. You can get in and out of the bed. We're gonna send you home. So I was at my mom's house, and
Yeah.
I was kind of in this new way of functioning. It was sudden. It was very fast.
Yes, it I mean, you went from being, like, very spry and healthy to being disabled in, like,
Hmm.
a snap and had to adapt to that, like,
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah, I was 24. I didn't have any physical disability other than my glasses, and so it was
Mhm.
pretty sudden, and just like to not realize how much I took for granted until things became difficult.
Mhm. So I have to say, before I get into the next question, like, you had I remember when you texted, you're like, "Can you measure the shower?"
Oh, that's
Because
right.
you needed a shower chair and you needed to make sure it would fit in speaking of, like, bathrooms that didn't have tubs, you had, like, that weird shaped shower in the basement. So like I
Yes.
took a picture of this of like the whole thing, and then I drew on it on my phone with all the little measurements and stuff. But I take seated showers now,
Oh, you
and they've
do?
made a huge difference in my life. And I
Mm,
really think that knowing that you had a shower chair when you were recovering made it easier for me to make that step for myself.
hmm. I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, showers, I can only shower like twice a week. They are exhausting. They use
Mm,
up all my energy. I have to recover after them. My dad came home one day when I was in my shower recovery pose, which is basically languishing on a couch. He's like, "Oh my god, are you okay? Are you sick?" I'm like, "Oh, no, I showered. This is normal." He goes, "I don't think that's true." I'm like, "Oh, sorry. I just showered. This is my normal."
yeah, this is how I have to
Yeah,
process this.
and so I still need to recover after a shower, but I'm able to bounce back a little faster if I
Mm,
take a seated shower.
mm,
And knowing that you had used a shower chair and that it was medically necessary, and that I was like, "Wait, there is nothing that's stopping me from sitting down."
yeah,
And I was like, "Oh, thank goodness I did this." Like, it's been such a relief.
yeah. Wow.
So, knowing that that was an option for me was helpful.
I have a
So,
friend who I remember it was one of the first times I had a conversation about like just this idea of care as like just a thing that if you are fully able-bodied, you don't realize how much you take for granted, but also conversely, if you're in any sort of high pain tolerance or pre-existing sense of chronic pain, you don't realize how much you've normalized. And I was talking to this friend and they were like, I think they were very much also just learning about like these concepts and were excited to share them. And they're like, "Do you take pain medication when you're in pain? Like when you have a headache, do you take etc." And I'm like, "No, actually, I think I haven't owned pain medication like in my apartment since I've been, an adult. So from 18 to at the time like 25, I just never had like ibuprofen or anything just where if my body ached, I would take it because I was just kind of like, it's just, it's how it is." And they're like, "That's a form of self harm." Was their interpretation at the time was just this idea of you don't identify like this thing that you are allowed to give yourself. You
mm,
don't let yourself kind of say this is something that can be helpful, and it's not a form of failure or defeat to accept that care for yourself. And very similarly, there's a meme that would go around that the first time I saw it, I was like, "Oh, I've never thought about this," which is like this person was describing an experience of being at the hospital or at the doctor's, and the doctor said, uh, "How is your pain? Like, how is it feeling?" Like, "Oh, well, the normal amount." And they said, "Well, the normal amount is 0." And this person just had to pause and be like, "Oh shit, I don't think I knew that."
I've actually had that conversation a few times recently. Well, first I found out that like growing isn't supposed to hurt.
Mm.
So like growing
Yes,
pains.
growing pains. I've had the same thing. Blew my
And I
mind.
was like, "You mean I wasn't supposed to wake up in tears crying and screaming because my legs hurt?"
Yeah.
And then like from that, like, no, children aren't supposed to be in pain. Like the
Hmm.
normal amount of pain is 0. The normal number of headaches is 0. Um, and I'm like, "Oh, well, in that case, I've been in pain my whole life.
Yep.
I should probably talk to a," like, I already see several doctors, but, like, I think I should tell a doctor that, like, actually my pain history is my whole life.
Yeah. Hmm.
Because before I had just sort of was like, "Oh, well, high school,
Hmm.
maybe." But no, it's been since I was 3.
Wow. Yeah.
Like, from what I can remember, right? But that's when I remember waking up with horrible growing pains, and doctors call them growing pains, but that physical act of growing isn't supposed to cause pain.
Yeah.
And that was so mind-blowing to me because that type of pain had been so normalized in our family. It's like, well, actually, that's probably a connective tissue disorder.
Yeah. No, my legs, I mean, like I said, like quote unquote anyone, like when I grew taller, I just assumed that that was growing pains. And I remember, especially when I was like 16, 17, I would get really bad Charlie horses all the time. I would be, my bedroom was in the basement of this house that we were renting. And I would just be laying on my bed. I'd be watching Netflix or I'd be playing guitar. And I would just get this seizing, shocking pain in my lower what is that? I always that's silly, my calf. I always get my calves and my thighs mixed up. My lower calf. Um, and I just would like it'd be like a soundless scream. Like I didn't want to yell to alarm anybody, but it hurt so bad that I wanted to yell, and I just assumed that that was like part of, well, I'm getting taller, so my body's just gonna hurt sometimes. Uh, and it was really strange to read that in just like, I think I was Googling something and it was like, oh yeah, the concept of growing pains isn't a real thing. I was like, that's bullshit. And then I was like reading about it and I couldn't believe it. And I posted it in this group chat
Mhm.
with me and all my friends. And all my friends were like, no, I experienced growing pains. And I was like, I guess it's something else. It's not just a normal thing that happens.
Yeah, the normal amount of pain. The healthy amount of pain is none. Pain is a
Hmm.
warning sign. Like, pain exists to alert us to something being wrong.
Hmm.
And like, "Oh, no, we just normalized that."
Yeah.
Hmm. So, you are a musician and a a developer of computery things.
Yes,
I can't keep up with what you're doing computer-wise, sorry.
that's okay. A
Um,
developer of computer things is how I'm going to describe it from
yeah,
now on.
yeah, you're welcome. You can steal that. So did your approach to your creative practices of singing and, music creation, because you also you don't just play music, you write music. Did your approach to your creative practice change after your accident?
This is the when I read this question ahead of time and was like processing it, I realized I hadn't really thought about how the pain influenced my process, but I do remember that the injury and the thing that I think anyone that's going to go through, having to deal with going to the hospital and getting, having to go through the health insurance process, like
Mhm.
any sudden injury, even if the injury itself may not immediately affect what you do, the process of getting injured in recovery did change my mindset. So, like,
Mhm.
thankfully, what I did is mostly involved with my hands. So, working on the computer, I actually was able to work pretty shortly after I got hit, which, like, that's its own whole fucked up thing. My job was very supportive, but it was also like, well, we can't. I wasn't full time, so they weren't able to like pay me.
Right, you didn't have PTO and you didn't have insurance through your work, which
Yeah.
was a whole nightmare unto itself.
Yeah, so I had to just work. I mean, I just had to. I mean, I had to pull out my laptop and just sit up the best I could, and I could do that. And so, thankfully, it didn't change the fact that I could still work on my computer. And then, music wise, playing guitar is pretty easy to do in a sitting position. But what did happen is just with the process of recovery, I was just laying down a lot. I couldn't, get up and drive and go places and like be as active as I was. And a pretty running theme of when I talk about my life at that point in time, up till then, was just being perpetually far too busy. And also just the fact that I was able to tolerate a lot of pain or otherwise was able to just kind of move as I saw fit. I mean, I was living in a van. That was the first thing that had to change was like, I can't live in this tight little cramped quarters of this van anymore because I need space to be able to take a real shower and get in and out of bed. I can't drive during this time that it's hard for me to like sit up and, be able to function quickly if I'm driving a vehicle.
Mhm.
Like I had to just sell the van. I couldn't really use it as a place to live. And so I had to get an apartment instead.
And that whole, like, romanticized dream that you had of, like, "I'm gonna live in a van and just, like, move around to different places and be, like, a remote worker and live wherever I want to and just have this van," like, was gone.
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
that couldn't be a thing anymore.
It's like someone needs to help take care of me because it's hard for me to do this myself. And I need some pretty standard creature comforts. I need like a home with heating and air conditioning, and I need a shower. And yeah, you can't rough it nearly as easily when you need to recover, especially for what ended up taking from December to March to really do the most recovery. And then I was given sort of a year of, you just have to not use your body a lot. You can't lift things, you can't jump, you can't run. You just have to lay low for a year. And that was
Mhm.
the thing that like it forced me to slow down, and it helped me realize how much I was always pushing myself. And when your body hurts, your body tells you to stop and slow down, tells you that it is hurt more
Mhm.
loudly when
It
you're
it does.
debilitated
You
that
took a
way.
lot more naps.
Yes. Yeah. I was like, oh, I'm
Which is
tired.
also something that I have learned how to do too.
Yeah, I'm tired and my body hurts and I can't ignore it now. Otherwise, I
Yeah.
just can't move.
So I remember there was an article in the paper well before your accident.
Mhm.
You know where this is going because
I
you've seen
do.
the questions. I'm just
Yes.
giving some background. You were pretty well known in Twin Falls.
Mhm.
You worked at a very popular coffee shop. You were probably one of the most popular baristas, I would say, among the women who went to the coffee shop.
Yeah.
Women of all generations actually probably had a crush on
Yeah.
you.
Oh, yeah. The
But
owner's
it's
wife loved me.
yeah, I mean, you're friendly, you're personable. You make everybody feel like they're important.
Thank you.
And you were also doing cool things with music in the downtown area. And an article came out that dubbed you the happiest man in town, which was possibly, yes, an oversimplification of, I think, who you are and what you're about. It wasn't wrong. I think it was just, in my opinion, I don't think it was wrong. I just think it was an oversimplification of who you are, which, how can you capture as a person in one article, right?
Yeah, well, there was similarly, there was this person, at the Wendy's in Twin Falls. Do you remember this
Mhm.
person? Who
No.
they also got a similar sort of coverage. I don't know if it was by the same reporter or for, like, the same
Mhm.
quote unquote series, but they would sing in the drive-through. And
Oh,
so
cool.
they would just like this really enthusiastic Wendy's worker was just spotlighted by the news because people would come through and they would like always have a new song for whoever was driving through, and people loved them because they were just a delight to talk to. But
Mhm.
then the news articles like, check out this person who sings at the drive-through, and you're like, cool, but like, what else do they do?
Yeah, but, like, who are they as a person? Yeah.
Yeah, what do they like to do when they go home? Do they also sing? Do they, what do their friends think of them? Like, yeah, you just only get this picture of like, hey, check out this person. They do this thing. They're like this, and that is a very small snippet of that person.
Yeah, exactly. Did you ever feel any kind of pressure to keep living up to that moniker or, like, conversely, pressure to grow past, like, that limiting view of who you were as a person and as an artist, whether or not the accident played into, like, you growing beyond that?
Yeah, not at first. I remember at first I thought it was like I was very proud of it. I was like it
Mhm.
was a cool summation of how I wanted to be perceived, especially because I was very religious at that point. Like I was kind of freshly on my own as an adult and grew up in a very Christian home and hadn't really been out in the world outside of that. And
Mhm.
so when it first happened, I was like, yeah, that's who I want to be. I want to be this, joyful, like presenting the love of Jesus kind of person. And I didn't think about it much at the time. And then a couple years later, when I started to challenge a lot of those things and sort of grow past a lot of that and start describing myself as like post Christian and feeling other feelings and like kind of becoming more emotionally mature and complex, I remember I wrote a song specifically named after that article.
Oh, the happiest
Uh,
man in town. Yep.
yeah, yeah. And
Wasn't it the last one on your EP?
it was out of
Yep.
all the five songs, is the very last song because it was like just sort of the whole point of the EP was it was grappling with other emotions other than being happy, and
Mhm.
then it was kind of outwardly just shedding that identity because it felt like it was reductive. I was just like I was very self-aware of the fact that I was not put together or particularly inspirational to myself, and I was a lot more frustrated and wanted to be able to be other things. And so then that song was a reflection of that. And then since then it is funny just to see that article and be like, gosh, I am glad that I'm not just that anymore. That
Yeah.
I became a lot more than that.
Obviously, music has shaped a lot of how you process things. I mean, you just talked about how you that EP? Yeah, that EP was, like, all your emotions other than happy, like, after being the face of a happy Jesus person for so long
Yeah, 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 yeah.
in a town where that's kind of expected. So music has shaped your life both before and after, the injury and recovery. What can you tell us about, like, your current projects? What are you working on right now?
Right now, so since that whole kind of the fun part of that whole arc of like post happiest man was I realized at the time when I had that article done, I was like, oh, I want to live in Twin Falls and I want to run a recording studio and I want to be the music guy here. And then sort of moved away from that.
Well, you did that for quite a while.
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
That was my identity, and then I was like, I've never really questioned my identity, and when I did, I was like, oh, I think I don't want to try to be that guy, especially in this place. Like, trying to create and run a community that I don't think was looking for that at the time. It was very hard to like have the fuel and the energy to basically
Mhm.
try and build a culture out of nothing. And then,
Mhm.
I got hit and ran out of that energy. And I was like, I think I am ready to go somewhere new and to participate in a culture that has been built in another place, like to not have to be the one person trying to run it and to instead be able to participate with other artists. I think I needed that because in Twin Falls, I had built a very small community of people around me that I was creating with, but we were all sort of like trying to figure out our process. And I was like, I need to go find a bunch of people who are way better at this than I am and be intimidated and try to make something by learning.
Yeah.
And so to answer your question, like at this point now, I'm in Philadelphia. I moved to the East Coast because there's a lot of really great music culture here, and there's actual venues and there's actual concerts and so many recording studios. Like I've just been sort of gleaning from that culture and watching these shows and been listening to a lot of music because I have been sort of wrestling with this thing that I've noticed where I feel like when I listen to a lot of great music and art and read the lyrics, that I feel like a lot of artists feel things differently than I do and feel very deeply in a way that I'm still sort of learning how to feel and thinking deeply and expressing things creatively. Like I feel like I have a very sort of narrow, shallow understanding of the depth of human emotion. And so I've just been trying to feel it a lot more while I'm focusing on the craft of putting together a home has kind of been my current art project. I've been trying to
Mm.
do like thrift shopping and furniture hunting and thinking about how to make a space, because in all of this, like when I was running a studio and when I was living in a van and living with you, like I call myself a recovering minimalist because
Mhm.
I shed things. I mostly put all my money and time into a recording studio, and so every apartment that I had was just like a bed and like a couch and a TV. And so like recently I bought art from you, and I've been
Mhm.
just like trying to build a space in a home that like feels like it reflects the vibrancy I want to reflect in the life that I've lived up to this point, a place that I want
Mhm.
to be in. And I've been learning video game development, which has been a fun new sort of direction of creativity, which I've been very excited about. It implements
Mhm.
music, but also implements computer work, which I've done for a long time, and storytelling and visual art. And it's a great way to just sort of stretch all of the art forms that I've sort of dabbled with, but I've not tried to get too deeply into, and it forces
Mhm.
you to put them all together into something. So that's what I've been working on lately. Has been listening to music more than playing music, and then building a home and making games. And it's been fun, but it's been different because I've always been like being a music maker as the motivating version of myself. And so I
Mhm.
just after I got hit, I slowed way down and I was like, if I lived a different life other than the one I was living, how would I feel about it and what would I learn? And then I know eventually I'm going to get a bunch of music equipment. I'm going to start going into these recording studios in Philly and I'm going to get back into it. And I'll be like, I do like this actually. This is really fun. But I've been doing something very different, which has been really cool
That is really cool.
and directly influenced by the slowdown that I had from getting injured. It led me in a different direction.
Yeah, I think kind of those life-altering moments do that. I don't have anything
Yes.
profound to say about it. It's just that that happens. My life is divided into, like, the time before and the time after too, where, like, I was forced to slow down and
Yeah.
really evaluate what am I doing? What do I wanna be doing? Are the things that I'm doing worth the energy and the angst? What do I wanna still hang on to? You mentioned, like, that you're taking the time to feel things more deeply, and I think that's something I can resonate with too. I've always felt things bigly, like, but it wasn't really until I left my job in Idaho and moved back home and, like, slowed down enough to, like, recover from burnout that I could feel things in real time,
Mhm.
where before I was so stressed and, again, like, making myself do all these like, I was hyper driven and, like, really busy all the time.
Yes.
So, like, I felt big things, but usually it was, like, big stress.
Oh man, the portion of my life that I can define as being stress motivated is too much of it. Like I
Yeah,
think the last
exactly.
3 years, I could say, have not been motivated by stress, because up until I
Yeah.
got hit, it was just like I was running sort of on stress. That's where a lot of my energy came from, I think.
Yeah. But like being able to slow down and feel deeply other things at the time that I'm experiencing them. I still joke that it takes me 3 to 5 business days to process and fully understand my anger,
Hmm.
but that's because I swallowed it and didn't let myself experience anger for so many years. I still need
Hmm.
time to figure it out. But most of my other emotions I can tap into pretty much as they're happening. And it really took slowing down to be able to do that, to make space for them.
Yeah, I think that that's the, for anyone who listens to this and is curious about like the insight of grappling with, changes in your health, but also just wanting to empathize if you're not in that place, is like, one, I think that it's really important to recognize how hard it is when you're in pain to do things. And I don't think I knew that until I had a very sudden shift. So, if you as a listener are somebody who is doing well and hearing this, slowing down feels really nice. And it can be kind of amazing. If you've never done it, you should try it. But also,
Like,
like,
don't wait for your body to make you do it.
yeah, totally. And I think that now I'm in this place of like just still trying to kind of get to a place where I understand what my limits are, because in the process of recovery, you start with like a very, very small amount of energy because your body is
Mhm.
just in the healing process. And then getting to a point where like I'm recognizing, and I've been thinking about these last couple months, is like I have less capacity than I did before, and I don't like how that feels. And I still have to decide how I feel about that and what
Mhm.
to do now. Like I think that it's something that is important to grapple with and to not despair about. But I still
Mhm.
feel like this is new. It's new to be able to say that I can do less than I could before physically, because my spine hurts when I've been walking all day. I was in New York at a show and I was on my feet and I had a great time. And then when the show was over, I like bent over so that I could like relax. I was like, oh, I'm done. My body is done. I have to go home because I can't walk anymore.
Yeah. Like I am in pain.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Once it we had pretty nice weather through the fall. It stayed really nice. Once we got that first real cold snap, my body went, "Nope."
Hmm.
I am hurting. Oh,
Yeah.
man. Just once it gets really cold. I mean, I'm in pain all the time,
Yeah.
but it's fairly I say it's tolerable. Like, I don't know, maybe it would knock somebody who doesn't experience it all the time, it would probably knock them on their ass.
Yeah. Totally.
Um, but, like, I just live with it. But, like, my winter pain is, like, totally different.
Yeah.
Like, that cold gets in your bones, and it's just I hurt. My like, the little all the little bones in my feet hurt, and my knees hurt, and all the little bones in my hand hurt, and my ankles hurt, and it's just all of it. It's just
Yeah.
places I didn't know could hurt, and I just feel like I can't get warm, and I'm like, "Wait, why did I move back somewhere
That
where it
really loves to be cold.
oh god, where the cold hurts your face and everything else below it."
Yeah. It gives me a lot more patience.
Like, oh, yeah, because the rest of like, the support and the slowing down and the family and
Yeah. Oh, it's
that
worth
part
it.
makes it worth it, yeah.
You were very helpful for that too. I appreciate that. Thank you for helping with that recovery process.
I forgot to turn my phone off. That was my nap alarm.
Oh yeah, is it time? Is it time? You're an hour behind me,
Yeah,
right?
it's time to
So
wake
it's
up, actually.
oh no.
Today's all messed up. It's alright. Sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, I think that was the gist of it. Is like, man, I'm very thankful for that part. Like, I think it's really good to have people that were just like during the recovery process, but also just like understanding the patience needed for somebody in pain. Be
Mhm,
like, oh yeah, it's gonna take Jordan a little longer for us to get ready and go somewhere. And it gave me greater empathy for like my grandparents and my dad. Like my dad had a really debilitating injury and he was just in pain all the time. And
mhm.
he didn't need to be as mean about it as he was, but like part of me was also like, oh, I get it too. Like he was in excruciating pain and we wanted to be on our feet all day doing stuff and he literally couldn't, but we
Yeah.
didn't understand like how much he couldn't because we didn't take it very seriously.
When I've had several bad days, like really bad days in a row, I do get really cranky and very short. And I recognize it usually after the fact. And I'm like, oh, I'm really sorry. I'm in a lot of pain. I don't have any patience. Shouldn't have
Mhm.
snapped. Like I don't get maybe I do get mean and I don't notice. I do get really short though. It's sometimes very hard to be nice when I'm in pain.
Yeah.
So I get that. All right, I have one more question. What is one true thing that you have learned from your creative practice?
This is a good question. When I was looking at this and thinking about it, I didn't quite have a great answer for it, but I think I have a decent answer for it, which is there's a musician and video maker. His name is Adam Neely, and I really like some of the stuff he's talked about because it's connected to some other conversations I've had with other people about music in particular. But I think this goes for any craft, which is like when you're making art, especially if it is an art that is music or any sort of uh, physical or digital art, anything that involves your motor muscles, your body, it is as much a form of athleticism as it is a form of like creative outpouring. And it is something that you can improve with regular practice, like any form of athleticism or activity. Like the thing that I think I hear a lot of people talk about, like especially older people, is like, oh, I can't, I can't play guitar. My hands just like it doesn't fit, or like I didn't do it when I was 12, so it's too late for me. And it's like, well, one, that's not true. You can start anytime because I talked to this friend of mine who's a neurosurgeon, and they said our body's capacity like to learn something and achieve muscle mastery doesn't begin to decline until you're in your late 60s. Like your ability to pick up and get good at something that is like learning an instrument or learning to paint, like in terms of physical capacity, barring the limitations of disability, which is always something that you want to be patient with yourself about. Like you could just pick up a new skill and get really good at it. It's not something that's just gated for youth. That is a truth that you can pick up and do that thing that you want to do. Your body has the capacity for it and can learn that. You're not too late. I think that's a very important truth. And also just like the best thing I think you can do for your craft is to do it even when you don't feel particularly inspired, in that same mindset of the way that our bodies and brains learn, our muscles learn the craft of getting better at, playing an instrument or painting something. Just doing it as a regular thing that you train yourself to do is really, really healthy because when the inspiration hits, you'll be ready for it. And it's really
Mhm.
important to just let yourself do it anyways, even when you're not ready for it, because you don't want to just sit and wait for the right moment. Otherwise, you'll never do it. So you should just do it, even when it doesn't feel perfect. Perfectionism is something that you don't have to give it your time. You can just do it because you like it. Doesn't have to be perfect. It probably won't, but if you just do it anyways, then when the inspiration hits, it'll feel great because you're like, oh, I've already been practicing. I already know how to draw. I didn't wait to learn how to draw until I had an idea.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for being here.
that was super fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Hoorf. To get the complete show notes and all the links mentioned on today's episode, or to get a full transcript of the episode, visit hoorfpodcast.com. Join the blessed herd of St. Winkus. By signing up for our newsletter, you can get Hoorf episodes delivered directly to your inbox. What's more, you get invitations to our monthly Coffee and Biscuits Chat, where you get to hang out with Ricki and Elle, talk about the show, and connect on the topics that mean the most to you. You can sign up for that at hoorfpodcast.com. If you become a patron for only $3 a month, you can support the creation of this podcast, help pay my editor, and join a community of caregivers out here just doing our best. Thank you again for joining me, Elle Billing, the chronically ill queer femme who is very tired, on this episode of Hoorf. Until next time, be excellent to each other. Hoorf is hosted by Elle Billing at Elle and Wink. Audio editing by Ricky Cummings at Ricky Poo. Music composed by Ricky Cummings. Hoorf is a production of Elle and Wink Art Studio LLC, all rights reserved. Hoorf can be found on all social media platforms at Hoorf Podcast, at HOORF Podcast.
Oh God, I have to fix everything.